Hi, everyone. Welcome to our Facebook Live broadcast. I'm Steve Altition, Director of Client Partnerships here at Pacific Cascade Legal. And today we're here with our firm attorney, Michael Trotter, to talk about the benefits of using a good co-parenting app. Hey, Michael, how you doing today?
Doing great. Thanks, Steve. Appreciate that.
Oh, I am so happy you're here. And when we talked to you about this, you were like, yeah, I love these things because I love these things. Now, when we talk to people sometimes, especially just sort of out in the community about that, I get a lot of questions, all sort of in the, well, what's wrong with just using my phone or my texts or emails or community doing it with social media? What's wrong with that? So let's kind of talk about that first, why that's really not maybe the best way to go.
Yeah. As you mentioned, Steve, yeah, one of the difficulties, at least I find it in my life, just even managing the relationships that I have, all types of relationships that I have,
Yeah.
is that it can be overwhelming, and oftentimes I am so overwhelmed with text messages that I don't even look at them, right? And so, can you imagine having not only your text messages, but you have your various social media apps. So trying to keep track of all of those different platforms is very challenging, especially if you're a person who's overwhelmed by even keeping up with text messages, for example. So a co-parenting app will put it into one platform that makes it less overwhelming for the individual.
Oh, yeah. Text. I must have, I don't know, hundreds of texts on my phone. And to try to scroll up for 3 minutes to
Yes,
find a thing is virtually impossible these days. And a lot of people just don't save them. They don't save texts, they don't
yeah,
save emails. And so that can, be problematic if you're going back, well, I did too say that.
correct.
So, yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah,
So let's
and
then go, why an app? Why an app, and then maybe specifically why an app about co-parenting?
yeah. So to address the first question is why an app? Well, as we discussed, is that texting and other various social media platforms that we have, there's a variety of them, and they're useful in many contexts, right? And so they have certain apps have certain benefits that other apps don't have. For example, we use apps for listening to music. I have all kinds of apps. Well, I have my grocery apps, right? Safeway, Fred Meyer, those are just a
Yeah.
few, but there's many of those. So I have those apps. I have all types of apps, and so they're really designed to help make our lives easier, right? And so specifically, that's what's good about a co-parenting app is it's designed to make your co-parenting experience easier. Uh, so so as I talked about at the beginning here is relationships can be difficult, right? And communication is a cornerstone to any relationship. And so a co-parenting app helps with communication, reduces tension between the parties because you're communicating in an app that is one place and it helps keep the parties accountable. There's many benefits to the co-parenting app, and we can get into that in a little bit. But specifically, with co-parenting apps, the benefits would be things like, shared calendars, being able to sync those calendars, being able to pay certain expenses. Those are just a few. So that's why I would recommend a co-parenting app.
And one of the things I like about that is, like you referred to earlier, is it takes the some of the emotional side off.
Yes.
It's like if you're talking to somebody and they say something you don't like, it can spiral downhill really quickly. So I,
Yeah.
I do like that.
And I use, a lot of so for the co-parenting apps, they're particularly helpful in high conflict scenarios, right? They can also be good in your non-high conflict. But typically, I like to really suggest them in where you have two parties, where you have the parties where they have a difficult time making decisions together, right? The court even, when you look at it, the court even encourages throughout the proceedings it encourages the parties to communicate. Why? Because that's in the best interest of the child in the long run. So the co-parenting app that's recommended by courts too in many instances, the co-parenting app is designed to do that too. It helps is to encourage the parties to communicate, and it does a number of things, but it also holds the parties accountable, right? So you can use the communication and the activity in the co-parenting app to help you with your proceeding as well.
So can then, one of the issues like we talked about was, having text here and emails there. And do co-parenting apps have the ability to sort of capture all of those things so that, you know, you have an app and a calendar, but hold up, where's my text where I said this is when we were going to do it?
Yeah. Yeah. So it has the ability to help you do a number of things, like, for example, it helps you stay organized, right? And so one of the things that I mentioned is earlier is that it really helps with shared calendars. It helps you note certain things, like, for example, doctor's appointments or sports practices or pick up and drop off times, for example.
Yeah.
Um, and then it also allows you to track parenting time. So, for example, if you're scheduled to pick up the child on this particular date, it'll show that you did, and it's a completed task, right? So it shows and it shows the task that was handled, and it helps the parties stay accountable to one another. As I mentioned, it also helps with not only helping to stay organized, but you can also organize your documents. So any of the custody documents from your legal proceedings can be stored there, so the parties can review that whenever there's a question about what should be happening according to the parenting plan. It helps you store that information, so you're able to um, keep track of important documents like files and image sharing. The other
Oh,
kind of benefit to it is that it's a central database to store information. So, for example, if you were to rely on your own hardware to keep track of things and you lost that data all of a sudden, then all of that's gone. But in this case of using a co-parenting app, it's a central server, right, through the co-parenting app company. And so it helps you with keeping your documents from getting lost due to some type of interruption.
oh,
Um, so
that's a
yeah,
huge thing. Yeah, that's a huge thing. I mean, it's so easy in, this day and age to have, your computer go down, your computer lose a connection, they files are lost. That's what I really like. So on the calendar part, is it is it two separate calendars and each party better put the stuff in, or is it like a shared calendar that once it's in, it's there and updates for both parties at the same time?
yeah, it's my understanding that it's a shared calendar, and that's something that would be updated. You'd be able to see those updates in real time together on the same shared calendar.
Yeah.
It also sends the beauty of it too is it also sends alerts to the other party when there is something added to the calendar or something removed from the calendar. And that's the other feature I want to talk about, Steve. It also keeps track of information that was deleted, right? Or information
Yeah.
that was never responded to, for example. So,
Yeah.
while oftentimes, as I mentioned earlier, where you have situations of high conflict between the parties, oftentimes there'll be some communication, but yet the other party won't respond to that communication for whatever reason. And the other party would have never reached out with the first message if there wasn't an intent, right? So how that's helpful when I put that into context is let's say you get far along in your proceedings and you're really trying to make something happen, and the party has never responded to that. Obviously, you're able to go back and show the courts that you made attempts to do that, but the other party never responded. So you really acted in good faith, and it's questionable as to how the other party acted, and that can all be documented and tracked in the co-parenting app.
I love that. That adds that accountability. Like you said,
Yes.
I never saw that. You can't say
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
I mean, unless you had your eyes closed.
Yes. Yeah. So I mean, that's to be honest with you, it's there's less accountability for me just using the multiple platforms, right,
Yeah.
versus the co-parenting app, um, because there's it's different in that sense, in that really I don't have, while I should be accountable to myself to respond to text and other social media responses, I don't really have to. right?
Yeah,
In the co-parenting app, right, the goal is to get the parties communicating in a way that's in the child's best interest. So really, you should be held accountable. Why? Because it's in the child's best interest. So
exactly. And I know that, in the old days, the co-parenting apps, when they first came out, basically were geared almost exclusively to parenting time, the kind of issues we've talked about,
mhm.
when are you going to do transfers? When do you need to change a transfer? All that kind of stuff. But I know that they've expanded, and I think now don't some of them help on issues like, well, expenses.
Yeah,
There may be shared expenses.
yeah, absolutely. So that's the other, other than just staying organized, one of the things that the app helps you do. It also helps you track those shared expenses. So an example of that would be any child, for example, you can even do child support payments there between the parties. There could be other expenses relating to other child support related activities, right? One of them could be, example would be daycare, right? So there's a number, a laundry list of expenses that can be tracked and paid. And you can also receive money. Obviously, that would mean you would receive money in the same way or same fashion. So it's very helpful that all of that can be managed in the one platform. So you don't just have, you're not only dealing with the issue of parenting time, but you have all these other benefits, such as the shared expenses, document storage, um, record keeping, those types of things.
I love that. And on the expenses one, again, I'm sure you see it all the time that following the divorce, there's support payments, and they're fairly straightforward.
Yes,
Not
yes.
always, but fairly. And but then there's this whole other expense that's one of the parties is either ordered to do, or it's left in sort of a limbo situation, like, somebody wants to do an event or go to a vacation or or join a team or something, and it's not necessarily down who those are for.
Mhm.
So uh, you can actually, it seems like, use this even when you don't agree. And that's the kind of other part with this that we've been
Yeah,
talking, but haven't really talked, is like, this doesn't mean only things you agree with go into
right.
this thing. And
Correct.
if you
Yeah,
say, hey, I had to pay $142 for this, and I think, we should split that. That doesn't mean you have to agree to it, but at least
yeah,
now it's in a spot
correct.
where they
Yeah,
can
and that's
again say, yeah, you never asked for that.
yeah, and I think like you're alluding to is that it's not just a space for agreement, but it's also a space to hash out areas where there is possible disagreement, right? And again, the tool is designed to bring about and encourage effective communication. So even the disagreement, I would say, is beneficial, right?
Yeah.
Because you're trying to get to the idea is that through the disagreement, you're trying to get to agreement. And so you can keep track of those communications between the parties and show, for example, one party could show that they're actually trying to, or even both parties are trying to show that they were working on this particular issue. They worked on it for this long, and perhaps they never reached agreement on it. So now you're back in court trying to reach agreement on it. But you have a history, you have a record of the parties trying to reach that agreement, and that information could be used and very helpful in a subsequent proceeding.
Oh yeah, I can see that. The Obviously one of the issues
Mhm.
that people come up with is, what do they cost? And way back when, they were free, but they're not necessarily free, or maybe they are now. But I imagine with all of the things they do, um, people can have a range of how much they want to have at work.
Mhm. Yeah, so there are some apps that are free, and I've seen some apps that are as costly as or affordable as 25 dollars per month. So the old story about lawyers not doing math. I'm not going to attempt to do math here, but 25 times 12 here's your annual figure. And if you take that figure and you compare that, what that sums up to be, compare that to the hourly rate of an attorney, right? And there's various rates of attorneys, and that's just the hourly rate. And so if you take the hourly rate plus any court proceedings, you're looking at, an expensive invoice from a law
Yeah.
firm. So when you look at the cost of going back to court relative to the cost of having this app, it's very cost effective in terms of uh, having all of your information in one spot, trying to reach agreement on issues in one spot. You're trying, because the issue, and it works. I've seen it work very effectively, especially, like I said, in high conflict cases where the parties are trying to text and reach agreement on certain issues. But when they start using the app, they effectively use less of my time,
Yeah.
which is really good in many instances because for a number of reasons. I can go into a number of reasons why it's better. But when you're comparing the two costs of the app itself and the going back to court, it is a very cost effective uh, plan. So again, I would encourage using the co-parenting apps. And again, those rates typically go from free to $25 a month. The key to using the apps though is to you want to do your research and try to find apps that fit your needs. So not
Yeah.
one app, no, not only one app is, there's no one size fits all. But there are a number of apps that can be used. Our Family Wizard is one that's really popular, and there are several others like Close App. Um, so, the other apps would be like App Close, and then Two Houses is another one, and Talking Parents. Those are some of the apps, other apps aside from Our Family Wizard. Those apps, many of the apps like Our Family Wizard, I can only speak to that one because that's the one I use most. Is those are even though those may be recommended by your attorney, oftentimes you can build that into the parenting plan and have the court order it. So that's another thing that I see in the court systems here is that oftentimes without me even asking for it, it has been ordered in some instances. So it's highly recommended by the courts, and I think it's very beneficial.
Oh, I love that idea of getting it put into your parenting plan or even ordered because, it's like sometimes the courts can order how support payment is made,
Correct.
how you have to go through that. And
Yep.
this this comes to the next question I was going to ask, which is what if one person doesn't want to use it?
Hmm.
And is there any reason for the other person to use it, even if one person says, "Nah, I'm not going to use it."
Yeah.
And so, I
Yeah, I
mean,
think that, yeah, and that's a good question, and I sometimes struggle with that myself in my practice. And how do you encourage the other party to use it? What I found is that there's a couple of ways you can do it. One reason why a party may not want to use it, it would be cost, right?
yeah,
And so oftentimes you can encourage your client to maybe pick up the cost for the other party, and that would help overcome that
right.
objection to cost. Um, and if a person doesn't want to use it, obviously you can't force them to, but you could potentially through the order we just talked about. And there are various reasons why others may not want to use it. Perhaps they don't want to be held accountable. And again, that is a personal choice, and that's the choice that an individual can make. But in speaking to directly to the question of whether or not you can, if one party can use it and the other party not use it, I'm not sure it would be. It's unclear to me whether or not that would be effective. Uh, but I have just expressed some ways that you can get the other party to agree to use it. Again, those reasons would be the ways you would overcome that would be through paying for the app or getting the court to order it.
Yeah, yeah. I imagine the calendar part would be, let's say I'm a forgetful person,
Mhm.
and having a calendar app and nothing else would be very helpful.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
just yeah,
Absolutely. And it's just unclear to me yet. I'm not sure how. Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah, absolutely. Or that's true, Steve. That's a great point, actually. Is so yes, one party using the app and all of its features still could be helpful in that regard. I see what you're saying. And so, for example, if you're a person like myself, where I'm overwhelmed with all the different apps, then perhaps even if I just had the co-parenting app on my end, say there was another party involved, that would keep a lot of my information all in one spot, like you said and alluded to, the calendar in and of itself, right? Documents, custody documents could be
Yeah.
there. Keeping track of expenses could still be there. I think, again, you raise a great point, is it could still be used even for just one party. Yep,
Yeah.
great
The
point.
um I kind of like it, even, and I should ask, even if it's possible, or you think it might be worthwhile getting it before the divorce. Because you got hearings, you got mediation, you have other communications that may be going on directly, especially if someone doesn't have an attorney.
Mhm.
Um, so is this something that could actually be helpful even before the divorce is final?
Yes, because I would say absolutely. One of the instances I would think would be even if you look and extrapolate a little bit, and even if you look at unmarried partners, right, where there's no divorce
Yeah,
pending, that's one example where it could be helpful. Obviously, there's no divorce if you're unmarried, right? So it'd be helpful for the even the individuals who are unmarried parents. But before the divorce is finalized, assuming you have married individuals, it's very helpful. In most of the cases that I have where it's implemented, it's early in the proceedings. In fact,
yeah,
the earlier, the better. And again, those high conflict situations, you want to get that implemented as soon as possible because divorces aren't typically short.
yeah,
In my experience and practice, they can range. Some of them, in the best case scenario, are done in 3 months. Some go a couple of years, right? Some are 1 year. But the sooner, I always say, the sooner you can get the parties agreeing, the better off. That's the kind of practice I like to lead because that is, for a number of reasons, the most effective. One is if you have children, it's in the best interest of the child. Even if it's not children, then it's going to be in the best interest of both parties from a financial standpoint because a lot of the expenses in litigation and family matters is really, for lack of a better word, it's kind of this emotional back and forth, bickering, for lack of a better word, about
yeah,
certain assets, right? And so the sooner, and that, you can't remove the emotion from these because relationships naturally are emotional. So the
yeah.
sooner you can become agreeable to certain things, it's going to be. And the other thing I think that people forget sometimes in family law matters is that it's not never going to be a win-win, meaning you're never going to win everything all the time. So you're going to have to give up some things, and that's the part where once you start realizing that, I think things start going a little bit better for the parties.
Yeah.
Is that where you can become agreeable on giving up certain things, then you begin to resolve your case.
As you keep talking about this, my brain keeps going to this, and I don't know that it's ever been suggested. This would work without kids. I mean, it's called a parenting app, but
Mhm.
it does a lot of other stuff.
Yep.
And like you said, when you're with some other, high conflict, it's almost as if it's the parent-child thing going on anyway between.
Well,
And having this as a modifier uh, would be important. It just to help keep those tensions out and keep the other person, if you're worried, um, in line. Because then that it gets to my last kind of question, which is, you know, inevitably someone's going to try to bully on this thing.
oh yeah,
There's going to be the
absolutely.
narcissistic parent that's going to, send something every 14 seconds
Yes.
and try to somehow use it against the other person.
Yeah. Yep. And those every 14, seconds or 14 minutes or those are all that's all something that, for example, the co-parenting app will keep track of and help the parties remain accountable. Otherwise, because what happens is the otherwise the attorney's time gets tied up trying to
Yeah.
resolve those communications every 14 minutes, which is then billable, right? So why not go ahead and set yourself up on an accountable system in an accountable system without even with like as you mentioned, even without children, having those communications in the app would be helpful because you're cutting back on some more of the emotional stuff because you're going to think twice when you're communicating in a secure platform that's
Yep.
documented about. And also I forgot to mention this another beautiful feature of our Family Wizard, and perhaps other apps have it as well, is it's called tone meter, right? And so let's say, for example, when I send
Yeah.
a communication to the other party, I may start out with, it's kind of the rule about don't ever when you're in the heat of the moment, don't send an email because it's generally going to be not the one you really wanted to send in the end, right? Because you're wanting the other party to maybe agree to something, right? So the tone meter is designed to help you realize, wait a minute, maybe the tone of my message isn't appropriate. Maybe I should back off of that word or use this word. So the tone meter helps monitor the tone of the message that you're sending to the other party so that you're sending appropriate and effective communications to the other party.
I love that. No F
Yeah,
words.
that's a good one. Yeah,
That's
right.
a good one. I can just
That's
see it.
back
I
on
mean, if you,
swear words.
yeah, yeah, you start off, okay, you lousy blankety blank. Probably it'll say, well, maybe you can find something else to
Maybe we
say.
find something else. Yes.
Oh, I think that's wonderful. I think that tone meter thing, I mean, it's a little bit of a therapist.
Yes, that's true. Yeah, I like
Yeah.
that. Absolutely.
I love that. Well, we have absolutely ran through our 30 minutes, and it
Wow.
goes way, way too short.
Yes.
So, first of all, thank you for doing this. This is really wonderful.
Thank you for having
And
me.
if I could ask one more sort of like parting question, if you had, someone was saying to you, well, why do I really need it? And you said, well, the one thing you really need it for is, what would you say?
Communication.
Yeah. Yep.
Communication, and that's because it goes back to the key to any effective relationship is communication.
Yep.
And the app is designed to help the parties communicate effectively in a secure environment um, that has a therapist, as you mentioned, right, who's kind of in the middle of all of this
Yeah.
and looking out for what's in the best interest of not only the parties but also the child. So I would say communication. That's the biggest piece.
Yeah. It's not only a therapist, it's a judge. They're gathering evidence.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's right.
There's
Got
lots of
him.
good things
That's
it,
the
it
right point.
does. Well, again, thank you so for joining. This has
Yeah,
been really cool. And I really like the way you could make this topic. You didn't make it a tech topic. Otherwise, I would have been dead
yeah, me
because I'm
too.
just lucky my screen doesn't go away during these. That's a win for me.
I understand that. Hence all the text messages that I have not read.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. So
Thank you
thank
for
you for
having me.
being here. Oh,
For sure.
I love it. We'll do something like this again. This is great. And everyone else, thank you for joining us. Anyone has any questions for today, further questions on today's topic, post it here. We can get you connected with an attorney. And until next time, stay safe, stay happy,